Thanksgiving planning always sneaks up on us. Every year I say I'm going to get ahead of it, and then I don't. Potlucks, the big family feast. But this year I'm keeping things easy and stress-free with Whole Foods Market. It's my one-stop shop for everything I need all month long. From quality organic produce to great prices on turkey and amazing deals on baking essentials. Plus, their 365 brand always keeps my pantry stocked with the basics without breaking the budget. And for the days when life gets too busy, their grab-and-go sides are a lifesaver. The creamy mashed russet potatoes and sea salt and cracked pepper green beans are perfect for potlucks, quick dinners, or last-minute Friendsgiving plans. Nobody needs to know I didn't actually cook it myself, right? I love browsing their produce sales for fresh ingredients to make casseroles and classic sides that taste like home. And if you want to skip the cooking altogether, Whole Foods Market Catering has you covered. From turkey to dessert, all made with the same better ingredients and high standards that you'd expect. Make sure to order by November 25th to reserve your bird, your sides, and your sweets. This Thanksgiving, save more, stress less, and make it delicious. All with Whole Foods Market. Shop everything you need for Thanksgiving now at Whole Foods Market. Oh, and happy Thanksgiving.
This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered legal, medical, or mental health advice. The views and opinions expressed do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of the podcast and are not intended to malign any religion, group, club, organization, business, individual, anyone, or anything.
I'm Sarah Edmondson.
And I'm Anthony Nippy Ames, and this is A Little Bit Culty.
We woke up from a cult, and that journey was captured in The Vow on HBO and in my memoir, Scarred.
Now, in this podcast, we break down the shame and secrets that make these experiences so destructive with honest conversations on how seemingly benign groups can cross into the cultiverse and how to spot and recover from trouble if it happens to you.
Each week, we bring in experts, survivors, and whistleblowers to explore red flags, resilience, and even share a few laughs, because sometimes you gotta laugh.
Subscribe to our Patreon for early and ad-free listening, some live Q&A, and exclusive content at patreon.com/alittleBitCulty.
Welcome to Season 8 of A Little Bit Culty. Welcome back to part 2 with journalist and author Ellen Huet, author of Empire of Orgasm. She's the journalist who put OneTaste's secretive world under the national microscope.
Sarah, you're going to do a little unplugged here and read a little excerpt, am I right?
Absolutely. I loved this metaphor that she writes about in the beginning of the book. She says, as I reported on OneTaste, I thought often about the parable of the blind men and the elephant. In it, several blind men each touched different parts of an elephant and confidently described the animal in contradicting ways. The man grasping the tusk is certain an elephant is rigid, with a sharp tip. The man touching the trunk claims the elephant is like a snake, and the man holding its tail believes the elephant is like a rope. The fable captures our tendency to over-extrapolate from our personal experience, to believe we know the whole nature of something when we have only experienced just a piece. And I love that metaphor. Why do you think I love that metaphor, Nip?
Why do I think you love it?
Yeah.
Because you like elephants.
I do love elephants, but I also think, and we actually have a similar, not a metaphor, but we talk about this in our book too, that lots of people can experience something and have a good experience, and they over-extrapolate their experience and say, well, I had a good time. I was a Boy Scout. I didn't get abused. Well, that's really great. We are glad and happy for you that you did not get abused, but there are many people who did. And so similar thing with OneTaste. Lots of happy customers, lots of very unhappy customers. Doesn't negate the other. Not black or white.
Also, my ability to take in your perspective and yours mine gives us a more robust look at the situation.
So what are we going to talk about in part 2? And if you haven't listened to part 1, please listen to
you know
it.
The drill.
We get into the psychological tactics, the culty tactics, the red flags. The trial.
The investigation more.
And the true cost of chasing transformation in a group where promises led to exploitation. We get into messier questions, too. We talk about desire, groupthink, human nature, the downfall of leaders.
If you've ever wondered how healing went rogue in Silicon Valley or how even smart, talented people can get caught up in dangerous systems, this episode is definitely for you.
Welcome back to part 2 with Ellen Huet, author of Empire of Orgasm.
Yes, thanks for having me.
The question we had is, the person that turned you onto the story, they targeted you. as someone for PR. Is that correct? Is that so? It kind of felt like you were
invited,
targeted for a reason, maybe.
Yeah. I mean, as context, as a journalist, I get pitches all the time. Like my inbox is full of pitches from people who work in PR who think that I might, and this is their job and this is kind of how the industry works. So it didn't feel particularly targeted. I think my guess is they thought, she's a woman. She might understand this a little bit better. And she covers startups and we're a startup, right? And I think, in that sense, they were right. Like I was interested in the topic and it has been an enduring source of interest and fascination for me, luckily, for the whole time I've been writing this book, because I know how hard it would be to write a book about something that I was only feeling lukewarm about. But it has been incredibly intellectually rewarding for me because I think these ideas and these tensions that come up in it have been they feel very complex and human. And I do think as a reporter, even though I read about business or tech, what I'm always looking for is the human element of the story, the thing that reflects our innate human psychology or, our human nature. It obviously because we're all human, it shows up in every industry that we work in, whether that's like sports or, AI or finance or whatever. It's like, it's actually often about the best stories, I think, are about human foibles and human desires and what connects us all together.
There's so much we could talk about. I think if we try to follow our normal format, we've talked about what's good. Then we always ask people, what was your first red flag? What's your first sense that something was off, that maybe you overrode? I mean, there were so many things that I wrote down in my notes and reading your book that I thought like, wow, all the cults have the same practices and the same template. It's just different names for it. Can I throw out some things and you explain to our audience what they were?
Of course.
And then we'll get into the legal stuff.
Yes.
So you've explained how the OM session works. You've explained that there's like people who come into classes and they leave, and there's people who work for the company or move into the house. Then it does get into like more of a free sexual experience.
The more intense behind the scenes life, but it is not the only part. Like people are also doing sexual experimentation that goes beyond OM or orgasmic meditation. Yeah.
We haven't even mentioned the LSD yet. Like the drug use on this one was off the chart.
For her personally, but it's interesting she chose for the community to be drug-free, to be sober.
Yeah. Nicole has spoken publicly about having had a lot of experience with LSD, especially in her younger years. And that was borne out also by, other reporting that I did in which I spoke to people who knew her in her 20s. She also apparently, according to those people, experimented with meth and was someone who used drugs in her formative years to explore the edges of, her consciousness. And later, when they were running OneTaste, they did choose to make the community largely drug-free, sober. They were smart enough to understand that they had to be buttoned up where they could in order to let this practice have a chance at making it mainstream. But as people who read the book will see, there are also, according to former members, certain instances in which Nicole would bring out LSD, or that there were still moments in which like that influence of those psychedelic formative years would still come back in the group. So it is this interesting tension where, and this is actually a whole other tangent that I couldn't even get into that much in the book, but they did also, many members would also attend 12-step groups as part of their immersion more fully in the OneTaste community. And there were many people who attended 12-step groups of various kinds. Some people even told me that they felt like there was kind of a social pressure to attend a 12-step group, even if you really didn't have a good qualifier for one. And it just became a part of the norm of how you might spend your time. It was like you would do OM, you would do sales, you would do Bikram yoga, and then you might go to 12-step. It was just interesting to me that there were these patterns of behavior that if you really became immersed in that world, that you would also pick up, maybe even if you didn't have a strong reason to go to one.
Just a whole hodgepodge of a little bit culty groups. We've covered, not Bikram particularly, just because we haven't found a whistleblower, but I mean, pretty much every yoga lineage has a sensational cult sex scandal behind it, including Bikram. And this is probably before he went on the run for the allegations against him. But that's a separate story. And we've covered AA and how that can be a little bit culty, allegedly. But back to OneTaste. So one of the red flags for me would just be like the adoration of Nicole. And the image I have that you painted in the book is like when she lived at the warehouse and she wakes up in her bed and everyone comes and sits around her bed and someone brings her special green tea with the handle just the right way. And they sit and like stare at her and she pontificates or waxes poetic or whatever. That's such a red flag image for me. Was that something that was pretty consistent with people, that they put her on a pedestal and she could do no wrong?
I mean, 100%. I think she, even now, even now when she is imprisoned, there is a sense that she is the visionary, the leader of the group, the person who is kind of carrying the spiritual momentum and direction of this group. But yes, back in the early days when they lived in the warehouse, yes, that's a perfect scene in which it demonstrates kind of how people thought about Nicole. I had many people who described to me some version of this sense of her being on a higher plane. Like they would describe to me people in classes who said things like, oh, Nicole knows what I need or what I want better than I do. People would ask her in courses, this is like on video, people would ask her in courses when she's kind of doing an off-the-cuff Q&A session, they would ask her like, what's next for me? You already know what I've studied at OneTaste, like what should I be doing next that would advance my growth? People really wanted to outsource their decision-making and their autonomy to her. I think that's something that I also found unintuitive that I would like people to understand about a group like this, is that you imagine that a leader, a charismatic leader, could be taking control of people's lives and that it's this extractive process. But in fact, what I also found was for a lot of people who joined the group, they would describe to me how it felt really good to give autonomy of their life to someone who claimed that they understood things better than they did or that had special insight. It feels like a relief, or like you have a direction, or there's something pleasurable about it. And I think that's another way that I want readers and listeners to have more compassion for people who go through this process. It's not like they were weak and someone came and took something from them. It's like actually they felt like they were gaining something by giving a form of control of their life over to someone who promised that they knew more, who promised that they would have an answer to these questions that had maybe been plaguing them.
But I think that's the bait and switch. You think you're getting all those things, but once you have, and you really do need to cut off all the other, you got to move into the warehouse, you got to quit your job, you've got to play full on. But if you're really committed and you're getting all those things, it makes it, A, you can't leave after that, right? And then B, even though it feels good to surrender to this higher power, then by the end of that, you've lost your autonomy. So anything that person suggests, you have to agree to, otherwise you're fucked. That's the bounded choice.
It's like, well, I've already trusted this person with so much. What would it mean if I all of a sudden decided they didn't have my best interests at heart? Now that you're pointing it out, I'm realizing that shows up several times in the book. There's a small example that I can think of where I believe it's like a woman who was involved in OneTaste told me about how she was given an assignment either from Nicole or someone else high up in OneTaste. And these were quite common, that leaders in OneTaste would, again, according to people who were there, told me that these leaders would give them these assignments that would, usually for sexual acts that would purportedly help them in their spiritual growth or help them in their personal growth. So you might get an assignment, for example, such as to have sex with a different person every day for 30 days. And that was supposed to help open you up. And I remember this woman describing to me how she had gotten an assignment and it was kind of edgy for her, and it maybe uncomfortable, but she did it. And, in describing to me why she did it, she described how she was like, well, I believed that I trusted Nicole. I believed she had my best interests at heart. And I think what's complicated is it's not black and white. I think it's hard to know where the promise of personal growth ends. And maybe there was also a second motive for assigning someone something. Maybe it was to increase control or to increase the level of sex happening in the community.
And that really is the first thing that people have to agree to. And the next thing, they call it a lift. It's like a staircase. So the first lift is, I'm agreeing to come here and learn from you because you know something that I don't. And in theory, that should work as long as everyone's ethical and honest and not using the power for their own gain and not being coercive. Yeah. Okay. So some of the other things were, the sales tactics, wow, they were highly manipulative internally within the group for getting people to keep doing more classes, but also getting people to recruit. In fact, I don't know if you're aware of the flirty fishing dynamic from Children of God. Do you know about this?
Yes, I have heard that term. Yeah, it has come up when I was talking to other researchers who have studied these groups and flirty fishing. Yeah.
That was actually, they even called it that. They were taught to go out and basically, the women were taught to go fuck men in the outside world and bring them in and bring in their resources and lure them that way. What did you see play out with OneTaste?
Yeah, those sales tactics at OneTaste are complicated and nuanced. So the official OneTaste position is that sex was never used as part of sales, but many former sales workers have described to me this more nuanced dance between the promise of sex, the promise of sexual contact, and sales. And, early on, there's a former member I talked to who describes how, they would have these public events where, they would have like an art exhibit with all these photos of breasts and like a naked woman with sushi served on top of her. And then they would, it like kind of silly things, but it was all underlining this promise, which was, this is how the person described it. They said, if you come and take a course here, like you will touch a woman. So like that is kind of one version of the promise. And later on, other sales workers described to me certain terminology they would use within the sales team, like white rabbit or hooking or fluffing. And these were all terms to describe the way that OneTaste employees could kind of dangle the prospect of sex or intimacy with one of them as a way to draw someone in. So like if you were a white rabbit, if you put out good orgasmic energy that made people curious about wanting to follow you deeper into OneTaste, or you were a fluffer if you like flirted with someone and got them kind of like energetically excited about the idea of like paying $10,000 for a course. And there was even a former member who described to me how they always tried to be careful about it. And he said that, we tried hard to not have the person who was wearing like lipstick and a short skirt be the person who would actually take the credit card to make the sale. It would instead be like one sales worker would do the flirting and then another person would come in and be like, okay, like, well, actually we have a week-long intensive that's starting in a couple months. I think this would be like a great next step for you. Are you interested in signing up? So I think they were aware of the delicate nature of that promise. People described also, there was a young man who was involved in OneTaste who described how he was once, I think it was suggested that he owned with this older woman. And then right after that own, a different sales worker called the woman and like sold her a course. So like
they're tag teaming.
Yeah. The way that it has been described to me is that people were aware of the dynamic and were also aware of trying to be very careful about how far they would go or how explicit it would be.
Well, speaking of parallels, in NXIVM, our audience will know this already, but building recruitment was called enrollment, and that was synonymous with building humanity. And the parallel I saw with OneTaste is that sales is love, correct?
Yes, that's a fun parallel. There's a moment in the book in which Rachel Cherwitz, who again was kind of the most enthusiastic and aggressive sales worker, she was the head of sales. Many people have described to me her hard-charging style with sales. And there was one person who described to me this refrain that Rachel would say, in which she would say something like, the universe is made of love and love is sales. Therefore, like the universe is made of sales. I might be getting that wrong. The official version's in the book. But basically, she would have these grandiose statements that made it clear that sales was seen as almost a spiritual pursuit, like being like a missionary. And this is a dynamic that other people described to me as well, this sense that if you were selling OM courses, you were doing something akin to potentially saving someone's soul.
Right.
They might have said that somewhat facetiously, but there was also an undercurrent of really believing it, the sense that you were really helping heal the world by helping them sort of heal their sexuality through this practice and through understanding this, and that, selling, which sometimes people find like a little off-putting or they think it's like inauthentic. Within OneTaste, sales was seen as this like grand mission in which you were like bringing people in.
It's noble.
Totally. Noble, spiritual, elevated, kind of like the coolest thing you could do at OneTaste within that world was to be like a really good salesperson.
I relate to that in the most uncomfortable, cringy way possible. Let's take a little break from the cultiverse. Here's a word from our sponsors. My friends, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but it is already gift-giving season. Has anyone started yet? Well, if you haven't, don't worry, we got your back. Well, actually, MeUndies has your back and your butt. Whether it's matching undies with your partner, coordinating PJs for the family photo, or going full festive with your friend group, MeUndies makes it fun, easy, and ridiculously cozy. Their holiday prints are adorable. Their fabric is next level soft, like, did I just sit on a cloud soft? And honestly, you'll want to be caught in matching loungewear this year. Made from sustainably sourced ultramodal, these are the softest, stretchiest, happiest undies and joggers you'll ever own. Over 30 million pairs sold, 90,000 5-star reviews, and a problem-free philosophy that means if you don't love your first pair, it's on them. We personally here in the Ames family are pumped to get a matching Xmas PJ set for our family photo shoot for Instagram. And get ready, friends and family. Pretty much everyone's going to be getting special Xmas undies and boxers with reindeers and Santas. And that's just the truth. Knock out all of your holiday gifting needs today with MeUndies. To get exclusive holiday deals up to 50% off, go to MeUndies.com/culty and enter promo code culty. That's MeUndies.com/culty, promo code culty for 50% off. Happy shopping and happy holidays. Between crowded airports, darker days with daylight savings, and end-of-year stress, it's easy to fall behind on important things like staying healthy. That's why I stay one scoop ahead with AG1, the daily foundational nutrition drink that helps my body keep up when life gets hectic. When Nibby and I first opened our first package from AG1, we literally fought over the little bottle, the shaker bottle, and I immediately took our D3 and K2 drops. AG1 is loaded with antioxidants, probiotics, and functional mushrooms to support immune resilience. And I love the packets for when we're traveling over the holidays. Superfoods and B vitamins help me sustain my energy levels without feeling the crash, while over 70 high-quality ingredients fill those nutrition gaps in one fell scoop. When stress hits hard, AG1's prebiotics, probiotics, and enzymes support a balanced gut, which means better regularity, stronger immunity, and a calmer mind. I love starting my day with AG1. It helps me feel refreshed, resilient, and ready to take on whatever is next. As the year winds down, don't fall behind. Stay one scoop ahead with AG1. Head to ag1.com/culty to get a free welcome kit with an AG1 flavor sampler and a bottle of vitamin D3 plus K2 when you first subscribe. That's drinkag1.com/culty. Enjoy! Okay, people, be honest with me. Have you even packed up your summer stuff yet? And seriously, the holidays are coming up. They are around the corner. This means it's officially time to get your home holiday ready. Extra seating for guests, cozy sheets and linens, new tableware that makes you look like you have your life together, and of course, decor. Wayfair is our one-stop shop for all things home, especially during the holidays. Thankfully, their Black Friday sale is happening all of November. You can score up to 70% off everything from sofas to spatulas, literally everything that you need to make your space feel festive and functional. These aren't some generic pieces you've seen 100 times before. Wayfair has unique styles that you can't find anywhere else, so your home actually feels like you. Wayfair has saved us when we moved into our new Atlanta home, and now one of our goals this holiday season is to furnish a new podcast studio with comfy chairs, some artwork plants, some paneling, and we are so excited to do all of that with Wayfair. Wayfair makes it ridiculously easy to order everything we need in one convenient place. So get fast, free shipping, even on the big stuff, and get help with the setup if you need it. Their new loyalty program gives you 5% back on every purchase, free shipping, and exclusive member deals. So deck the halls, refresh the guest room, and maybe finally retire that 2012 cookware set. Wayfair's got your back for the holidays. Don't miss out on early Black Friday deals. Head to wayfair.com now to shop Wayfair's Black Friday deals for up to 70% off. That's WAYFAIR.com. Sale ends December 7th. Happy shopping! Thank you for listening. Now, let's dive back into the cultiverse. I actually think OneTaste is harder. Yeah, I think it's a harder sell. But this is also like, it's in San Francisco. It just feels like it was more accepted there than it may have been in other places.
I mean, it was in San Francisco, but also New York, LA, San Diego, Austin, Boulder, London, Paris, like all over, Australia.
But this also like came at a time when people were, and this is in your book too, like reading, which I remember, I don't know if we ever talked about it, Nippy, because there was a group of Vancouver of people that were kind of dabbling in, I guess, polyamory and reading Ethical Slut, which you mentioned in your book. And like, how do you have a, relationship that's open and ethical and whatever. Anyway, there's just there's in every city, there's pockets of people who are more open sexually and want to do stuff like this. And that's great.
Totally.
You were outing San Francisco.
I think that one's fair. Definitely polyamory
Yes,
in the 2010s.
it was a thing.
Within the tech world was like big in San Francisco.
By the
sure.
way, I'm not going to name names, but there was somebody in Nexium. I can't remember the detail. I'm going to text them later. If they'll respond to me, they may not. But that told me that they did a Nexium intro night in San Francisco at the same, like in a OneTaste center or something like that.
Oh, fun.
Yeah. And I'm pretty sure she also dabbled in OneTaste, this person. And I remember, and she was kind of kinky. I'll tell you who it was later. Anyway. Cults collide. This happens. But the other practice that has a name, we didn't use the same name, but we did similar things in Nexium, was the aversion practice. Tell us what it was for OneTaste, and I'll tell you. You show me yours, I'll show you.
Yeah. Aversion practice often struck me as one of the most, as a very clear example of some of the ways that OneTaste philosophy could both be helpful, but was pretty quickly again, according to former members, like used as a tool of manipulation. So the idea of aversion practice broadly is this idea that you gain freedom and more spiritual growth, personal growth by doing things that you feel an aversion to. So things that you don't want to do, acts that you don't want to do, maybe with someone that you don't want to do, or something that feels uncomfortable or displeasing. And within OneTaste, it didn't necessarily have to be sexual, but many of the instances in which this was described to me, it was often sexual. And an example that people describe to me of how aversion practice would be invoked would be, let's say you're a female OneTaste employee and there's a class happening, an OM class, and where the students are expected to OM at the end of the class to try it out. And there are more men than women. And you need to have like stroking partners for the men who paid for this course. And so again, people described this type of scenario to me where they would then be asked or would be strongly suggested that they OM with a certain person who was a paying customer of the course in order to like give them a partner. And if you said something like, I'm not attracted to that person, or I don't want to do it, or I'm not feeling, I don't want to, people have described to me that they would then be told, you should do it anyway, for your aversion practice. If they showed resistance, there were other taglines that people described being invoked. They might be told, oh, what, you think you have like a golden pussy, or you might be shamed for having a golden pussy syndrome, which was basically meant that you thought you were like too special to have people touch your pussy. And I'll add a caveat here, which is that within OneTaste for many years, they intentionally used the terms pussy and cock for female and male genitalia because they liked the charge that went along with it. It was confronting, and I think they thought that was interesting and something worth playing with. So I'm not trying to use shocking language. Yeah.
No, it's the OneTaste version of princess. Like, it's like saying you're a princess. You have a golden pussy.
Yeah, exactly. Or they would sort of be pressured to be a yes was often a thing. Like if you were told that you were resistant, that was kind of a shameful thing. If you were a yes to a lot of things, that was seen as like big and expansive and you had a lot of power if you could be a yes to things. But what I think is particularly damaging about aversion practice is that these people, again, described to me how it was used as this strong rationale that completely flipped around your sense of boundaries and consent. It's like, wait, I'm choosing to do this thing precisely because I'm aware that I don't want to do it. And so like, did I want to do it or not? Like, it teaches you to bulldoze your own sense of your boundaries and your consent. And many people described to me after leaving OneTaste that one of the most difficult things they had to do was process what to make of choices that they had made within OneTaste, where maybe there was this pressure to choose something that you knew at the time that you didn't want to do. So then it's like, well, where was my consent in all of this? And I think there's no easy answer to that. And aversion practice kind of captures that twist in its own little package.
It is the most gaslighty, boundary destroying, autonomy destroying, vile practices. And there is sort of an easy answer that I might not have had a couple of years ago, but now I feel like, yes, you consented, but you consented to a lie. You consented to something that's fraudulent. That actually is not going to be good for your growth. You're saying, yes, I'm going to do that and plow through my aversions because it's going to be good for my growth. It's not. That's a lie. So if you consent to something that has fraud at the core of it, then they didn't consent.
Here's the thing and correct me if I'm wrong, Ellen, the reason Nicole vibed with this whole thing is because she had some trauma around her dad, and she felt like going towards her pain was a source of her kind of evolving it. So maybe she does believe this and just believes that her blunt instrument is for everyone, and it's not. Right. And part of that,
oh boy.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Like, I have a tool that works. Fuck you. It worked with me. And like, this is how I do it. And if you don't, it's abusive.
Part of what I was trying to do in the book is lay out the pieces and let readers come to their own conclusions. So it's actually quite interesting for me to hear the way that you articulated it, because I think that is one pretty plausible way to look at it, is that Nicole had this instrument that she believed worked for her. And it was quite a blunt, extreme one, broadly speaking. And her guiding belief was that other people would benefit from this too. And compared to, much more careful practices of like trauma therapy and things like that, it is not the same approach. And that's not to say that I think there were some people who benefited from it, but it was quite a blunt instrument. And well, I'll back up and say a couple things. First of all, one other thing I forgot to mention about aversion practice is they would also kind of shame you if you were too attached to your preferences.
Yeah.
So that was another, people told me that was another phrase where it's like, oh, your preferences, that's kind of like a dirty word, small-minded, that kind of thing.
Comfort for us, by the way.
Yeah. And again, there is benefit in exploring areas outside of your comfort zone. And I think that is at the core of all of these teachings at OneTaste. And again, this is not unique to OneTaste. It's true for many of these groups. There's a kernel of wisdom at the center of it. And I would argue they get taken way too far, or it's not done with care. And then what you said about her father, I mean, I'll caveat this with it's obviously a really delicate subject. It's something that I really tried to treat with care and responsibility as a reporter and as a person in the book. But yeah, for those who read the book, you'll see that there's kind of a detailed discussion of what exactly may have occurred between Nicole and her father when she was young. Her father, I've looked at court records, her father's a convicted child molester, child sex abuser, and Nicole has also spoken openly about that fact. But when it comes to what may or may not have transpired between her and her father directly, she has often been a little circumspect. There are other victims. I've actually spoken with one of his later victims, someone who was his granddaughter. And so it's, based on my reporting, I think it's fair to say that there was this pattern in his life. Anyway, I'm not trying to be too vague, but basically it's like she has at various times suggested to people who then told me about this that she was sexually abused by her father. But later in her life, she also rewrote this story to be a little bit more complicated, in which she recast herself in certain retellings as having played a hand in these interactions. It's all very complicated, and I'm wary of not wanting to misspeak. But I think it's fair to say that, she has herself characterized that one of her driving forces in understanding sexuality is trying to make sense of her father and her father's sort of harmful relationship with sexuality. And so anyway, it is, I think, one of the guiding questions of the book is this question of to what extent are Nicole's actions stemming from childhood experiences of hers? And I'm not a therapist. I'm not a psychologist. So it's I try to be really careful about it. But as a human, I think it's relevant. And I wanted readers to feel like they knew enough to try to come to their own conclusions.
Yeah. And I don't know if she's allowed to get therapy in prison, but I hope she does. And she's certainly funny as you're talking. I'm looking at it from the NXIVM lens of how somebody in NXIVM would look at that, about how, which is also therapy 101 in terms of how things get linked, sexual abuse, and however she felt with her dad mixed with that attention can be very confusing for kids. And I feel as she unraveled that and wanted to evolve it or get attention from her sexuality, it blew up in a way that fed her. It seemed to have fed her ego in a way that was a snowballing in a way that she couldn't control. That's my take as a non-therapist who dabbled in therapy. Do you know what I mean? I don't know if that's accurate, but I feel that it's just a super messy ball that needs to be untangled with a professional, not in this hodgepodge of new age personal development quagmire that she dabbled in. That's when we're talking about all the sort of red flags. One of the language things that I saw as a thought-stopping cliche was the term get off on any stroke, which goes back also to the aversion, right? Any stroke is not just the clit stroking. It's anything you should be able to get off on. Is that accurate?
100%. Yes. It was a phrase. Get off on any stroke was a OneTaste mantra of sorts. You would hear it repeated in their materials and in courses and that kind of thing. And it had a literal meaning when applied in an OM session, this idea that you should practice being able to pull sensation, even pleasurable sensation, from any stroke. So kind of no matter how someone is touching you, you should be able to get off, quote unquote, on it. But you're right that it was also applied metaphorically much more broadly. So even within OneTaste, a stroke could mean many things. This was their internal lingo, which, as we all know, is a way to, internal lingo can often function to heighten the sense of distance between in-group and out-group. And a stroke could mean a physical stroke on someone's clitoris during an OM session, but it could also mean many things. If you gave harsh feedback to someone, that was a stroke. I'm telling you, you did that wrong. That's me giving you a stroke. If there was a new decision within the community that we're all going to do this new thing, we're all going to go to Bikram yoga every day at 10, that's the new stroke. Or there was a period of time when the people in the company, many of them decided to get married. There was like a year or two when there were many marriages within OneTaste staff. That was kind of like the marriage stroke. Some people refer to it as that to me. And get off on any stroke could then mean, basically anytime you were having a hard time with anything, like maybe you were unhappy about your situation at OneTaste or someone had been mean to you, they would they could conceivably say something like, well, you should find out how to figure out how to get off on that stroke. And I love the phrase you used, thought stopping cliche, because I think it is helpful to name these patterns so that people can recognize them. I think that was one that it was used to push away complaints or resistance.
Well, because you're not allowed to suffer. You have to be happy. And that goes back to the other through line of OneTaste, which is also through NXIVM and Scientology and Tony Robbins and everything, which is that you choose. You choose your reality, you choose your emotions. You're responsible for your life. You're responsible for everything. If you're unhappy, that is you. That is within you. So that's, again, what you said earlier.
It's your fault if you can't figure out how to be happy.
Yeah, exactly. What's an RCR?
RCR, rapidly changing reality. So that was an acronym they used for a term, rapidly changing reality, which was simply a term they would invoke when they, and by they, I mean like OneTaste leadership, when they might make like a sudden decision. For example, there was a woman who described how she was asked to move from San Francisco to Las Vegas in order to open up a new OneTaste center there. And people had described to me that they would get asked to move cities on quite short notice for the sake of the business. And if they protested, it'd be like, no, this is just an RCR. This is happening, get with the program, and we're going to move forward. There's not really a chance to discuss the merits of this decision. It was more applied to, at least as it was described to me, it was often applied to business decisions or maybe personnel decisions and things like that.
Also thought terminating. You don't get to really think about it because it's an RCR. So jump in.
You're in or you're out. Yeah.
You're in or you're out. And you want to be a yes. So jump in. Now, there's so much to cover, directing people back to your book, and they can see lots of similarities. We didn't even talk about SEVA, putting, your time and commitment and all that stuff. The incredibly high cost of membership, $180,000.
Yeah. I mean, that was kind of the high water mark. But I mean, people described to me again and again, spending tens of thousands of dollars, going into debt for tens of thousands of dollars in order to buy courses. An intensive could easily cost $20,000 or $30,000. And often these people were both working for the company, they were employees of the company and paying into it in order to continue to buy courses like the coaching program or a Nicole Daedone intensive or that kind of thing. So the financial aspect was quite tightly woven into the experience of being part of OneTaste.
Right.
Even cult podcasts need sponsors, everyone. Check out these must-haves.
Does anybody wake up in the middle of the night and have to write a list of all the things they need to do? I mean, this is my life. It's an end-of-year pressure. It's the holidays. It's the sports. It's the to-do list. I should feel more productive. It's a low-level anxiety. I should finish our book. The list never ends. And I really should have started holiday shopping weeks ago. We're doing the best we can. But that's where Calm comes in. Calm is not just a feeling, it's an app. In fact, Calm is the #1 app for sleep and meditation, and it's here to help you feel better. Calm helps me tremendously with my anxiety, with my stress, with my sleep. I have it on standby, and then I put on a Calm meditation or a sleep story or a breathing exercise. So when the shoulds pile out, I reach for Calm. It's my go-to tool to release stress and make space to actually breathe, even on the busiest days. They've got guided meditations for anxiety, focused sleep, and calming music for nights when your brain just won't shut off, grounding exercises for when everything just feels like too much, and expert talks to help you build better habits and relationships. And you don't have to join a cult. The Calm apps put it all right in your pocket. So peace it's within reach. No pressure, no perfection. Calm your mind, change your life. Calm has an exclusive offer just for our listeners of our show. Get 40% off Calm Premium subscription at calm.com/culty. Go to calm.com/culty for 40% off unlimited access to Calm's entire library. Calm.com/culty. And tell Calm you heard about them from us. By the way, happy holidays.
Since moving to Atlanta, we have lost track of some of our finances. School fund here, savings there, old bank accounts. Half the time I'm trying to remember what everything's worth, and the other half I'm wondering if we're leaving money on the table. Feel organized and confident in your finances with Monarch, an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean interface on your laptop or your phone. And right now, just for listeners, Monarch is offering 50% off your first year with code CULTY at monarch.com. When we started using Monarch, we learned we weren't saving as much as we could, and how much cash was sitting idle and unallocated. And trying to keep track of our finances on more than one app ate into our valuable time. Monarch Money is built for people with busy lives who want to actually feel on top of their finances without turning into spreadsheet people. You just link your accounts, and Monarch does the heavy lifting. Smart spending breakdowns, clear visuals, and real insight into where your money's going. It's also great for couples. One dashboard, full transparency, no more, wait, we spent that much moments. And you can even loop in your financial advisor at no extra cost. So now, instead of guessing what our money's doing, we actually know. And honestly, it's kind of the best grown-up feeling ever. Don't let financial opportunities slip through the cracks. Use code CULTY at monarch.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarch.com with code CULTY. This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. It's that time of year when the days feel a little shorter, the light fades earlier, and suddenly, even small things feel a little heavier. It's a good reminder to check in with your people and with yourself. Maybe that means calling your mom or grandma, texting a friend you haven't seen in a while, or finally setting up that lunch date you've been putting off. Little moments of connection can make such a difference. And if you've been thinking about reaching out for therapy, this is your sign. Just like reconnecting with someone you love, it can take a bit of courage, but most people say they wish they had done it sooner. BetterHelp makes it easy to start. Their licensed therapists work across the U.S., and they do the hard part for matching you with someone who fits your needs and preferences. You can message, chat, or do video sessions, whatever feels comfortable. And if it's not the right fit, you can switch anytime. So as the days get shorter, remember, you don't have to go through it alone. This month, don't wait to reach out. Whether you're checking in on a friend or reaching out to a therapist yourself, BetterHelp makes it easier to take the first step. Our listeners get 10% off their first month at betterhelp.com/culty. That's betterhelp.com/culty. Sponsor break's done. Now back for more culty stories.
Do you think that was their downfall, or what do you think it was that caused the dominoes to topple?
I think it's hard to say. In the end, part of the prosecutor's argument stemmed around forced labor, or I should say conspiracy to commit forced labor, which means not necessarily that forced labor happened, but that one or more people conspired to extract forced labor. I gathered that in order to advance a legal argument about forced labor, it's probably helpful to show that people were working for little pay, or that there was a financial element where they felt like they were not getting properly paid. I think if you talk to people who were involved in OneTaste, I don't get the impression that the payment or like the financial aspect was a big part of it, but it's not necessarily like what people are still processing years later. Like there are more complicated emotional and psychological things that these people have described to me processing years later. But I think from a prosecutor's point of view, the financial element was part of their case. So hard to say if that was like what brought it down, but it was part of it.
It seemed like also just her thirst for more and never feeling like it was enough, like needing to reach more. Like it seemed like a never-ending hole for her to fill.
Yeah, that is something, when I talk to people who knew Nicole well or were very connected to her at various times in her life, they have described in trying to obviously armchair psychoanalyze, have talked about this sense of her never being satisfied with, even as OneTaste grew into this bigger and bigger cultural phenomenon, this bigger company, it was making more money. At one point it was bringing in like $12 million a year. There was this sense that she was dissatisfied. I will never be able to see the inside of Nicole's brain. And so all that I have tried to put in the book is just based on my best ability to talk to people who, but it's all, there's a lot that I'll never know,
right?
Because I can't know it directly.
What was it like to meet her in person?
Oh man. So yeah, for those who get to the end of the book, there's a scene in which I meet Nicole for the first time. And at that point, I had been working on the book for, I'd been reporting on OneTaste for 5 years, and I had never met her in person. I had watched all these videos of her talking. I had listened to recordings. I had spoken for hours and hours with people who knew her, but we'd never met. And of course, everyone describes how charismatic she is, how compelling she is. Actually, one of the interesting things that came up when I spoke with cult researchers about charisma is one of them, Janja Lalich, had said, she prefers to think of charisma as a characteristic that exists in a relationship between two people rather than inherent to the person, because there are people who many people might find charismatic, but others might look at and think like, this person's a phony. I'm not interested in what they have to say. So it helps explain why some people are really drawn to a person and other people might be totally immune to their charms. Anyway, many people obviously describe Nicole as charismatic. She's quite charming. And when she saw me for the first time, this was in the courthouse in Brooklyn, she spots me and she immediately smiles and waves where she's kind of far away from me. And then she comes closer and she's like, "Hi, Ellen." And I was like, totally, I was like, oh my God, how, like, I knew I might see her that day, but I just wasn't sure what it
She
would
ingratiated
feel
herself to
like.
you.
And she did. I mean, she really laid on the charm, and we met and had a very short conversation, shook hands. And I'm going to use the word starstruck, but I don't mean it in the traditional sense. But it was obviously like, for me, I have devoted a lot of time and energy to understanding this person. And so like to see her in person for the first time was affecting. And then, you know, she comes up to me and, you know, as we shake hands, I'm like, "Oh, it's so nice to meet you." And she says to me, "We have a strange intimacy." And I was like, oh my God, you're right. I didn't say that. I was just like, okay, I'll see you in court. I was very nervous. But she's right. We do have this unusual relationship, for lack of a better term, in that we have affected each other's lives. And
in a strange way. Yeah.
I don't really know how else to describe it. Yeah, a strange intimacy. She hit the nail on the head.
She nailed it.
Yeah, she really did.
Wow. In terms of the trial, like we could do a whole other podcast on that. But in terms of...
Probably will when we get the sentencing. Why don't we do it?
Yeah, we'll do another one when there's sentencing. We'll have you back.
Sure. There's a lot to unpack about like the way that the criminal justice system doesn't really quite fit onto what happened at OneTaste. That was an interesting aspect for me.
Reading the FBI and how they handled it and the questions they asked, it was very similar to our experience.
And, you know, I never went into reporting on OneTaste thinking like, is this a crime? That wasn't the lens that I was looking at. I was just simply trying to describe what had happened and understand what had happened. And, you know, when the law gets involved, they have a different...
It's forensics. That's pretty much what they're after.
Yeah. So they were found guilty on both counts of conspiracy. So did they not have the proof of the forced labor? Is that why?
I can only speculate, and I'm not a lawyer, you know, I could only speculate as to why the prosecution chose that specific charge rather than forced labor itself, but conspiracy. I mean, it's still a serious felony, so I don't really know. I'm guessing there was a legal strategy decision behind that.
And you mentioned in the book that it did follow in the footsteps of Keith's trial, right?
Yeah.
And lawyer.
I mean, the charges were less. Like his were obviously like, you know, but I think the sentencing was like 120 plus years in prison or something like that. But yes, it's the same regional office of the DOJ. And I think I could only speculate on the sort of reasoning behind that, because OneTaste could have been brought by prosecutors in other parts of the country, but this was the team that ended up going for it.
And the lawyers seemed, term I have, confidently stupid, kind of like they really believed that like they were going to get off, and like they were just pithy in their perspective. And I remember thinking, do they really believe that?
I mean, maybe that's part of how you bring the right energy as a trial lawyer. I wouldn't say I know, but, you know, the lawyer in question is also interesting too. Jennifer Bonjean is a defense attorney who has represented Keith Raniere, R. Kelly, Bill Cosby, and Harvey Weinstein, and now Nicole Dayton.
And she's 0 for 5, is she?
There was some Cosby thing that was, I think, a win for her. I won't say that for sure, but something like that.
Halfway through the book, I said, Sarah, we're going to see more female cult leaders, because she's Keith Raniere, she's Ghislaine Maxwell, and then the last part of your book, you said Stephen Hassan has said that we'll see more of these. And I'm wondering if you got to why and why you think that might be the case, or do you think that's the case? And Sarah, you chime in too, because we both agreed.
Yeah, I think as to the why, I don't remember if Dr. Hassan gave like a specific reasoning, but, you know, based on our conversation and based on kind of my general observations, you know, that observation comes within a larger and about how one of the enduring qualities of cults is that they adapt with the times. And so they're a reflection of what's culturally juicy at the time. And so like in the counterculture era, it was like bearded gurus on the commune, free love. You know, I'm making generalizations here, but you know, you imagine a cult from 50 or 60 years ago, it looks different. And that image isn't going to play well today. And so instead, you know, if you talk to cult experts, I think they would say the same thing. This idea that a cult today or a cult in the next 10 or 20 years is going to look different. It's probably going to be more digital. It might look like an Instagram influencer. It might look like alternative health promises that promise to like solve your greater needs. I think as more women rise to prominence in corporate America, there's just like in general a sense that more women can be leaders of these types of things. Like, I think that's probably how Dr. Hassan and I ended up having this discussion about how in the future, like more cult leaders will likely be women, because there's like it's a reflection of like, what do we look for in an influential person? And who are we willing to like put our trust into? And especially, I think, as there's a societal shift away from trusting institutions and more toward trusting, charismatic individuals who seem to have figured something out. I think you see that pattern, like, in news, in the media, in government, and all these things. Then that makes us generally more vulnerable to people who, an individual who comes in and promises something. And then like the lonelier we are, the more vulnerable we are to these kinds of things. So post-COVID, as like our digital lives make us more isolated from other people. There's even, in my day-to-day reporting at Bloomberg, I write about AI, and there's even a cult angle to the one-on-one relationships that people are developing with AI chatbots, which I could talk about for a long time. But basically, in reporting a story about some of these overly emotional attached relationships that people are having with chatbots where they end up having delusions and things like that, the way that these people have described these relationships has, there have been many parallels to cult dynamics. And some of them have even used the words cults themselves. They've said, if you spend 10 hours a day chatting with ChatGPT about like the answers to life, and you end up concluding that you've made some grand discovery, which, to be clear, this happens, then those people, it's like, well, they're being isolated from their friends and family because they're spending all their time talking to the chatbot. They feel like they've been selected for a special mission that has imbued them with purpose. They are ignoring other sources of information in favor of only listening to what the chatbot tells them.
I need to connect you with somebody who's doing a podcast about AI.
Chatbot was a woman. That's the answer to the question.
Yes.
Fascinating. I mean, I think zooming out, it's like what I hope people take away from reading Empire of Orgasm and other, and learning about cults is that they can recognize those dynamics when they show up in unexpected places, again, such as, who would have expected that companion AI might be a place where this is relevant? Certainly I didn't. And then I was reporting on it. I was like, wait a second.
Well, we have similar goals in that way, in terms of helping people develop that awareness of what do the red flags look like and not thinking that they are immune and seeing them in different places.
I'm surprised the story didn't get, I don't know, maybe it did more coverage, or maybe it's just where we're saturated with this stuff. But this one is like,
I hope that someone buys your book and makes it, I say this with a lot of my guests recently, it should be a series or a movie. I know it's been a docuseries, but when's the scripted version of it coming out?
I mean, we'll see. I think that, if people are interested, come find me. Let's talk. I agree that the characters and the human psychology at play here they're ripe for storytelling. And like, I think that the lessons from here, that is part of what inspired me to write the book, is that the lessons in here, I feel like they reverberate far beyond, sure, orgasmic meditation is like a pretty specific topic, but it's really about like, what do we desire? What are we willing to sacrifice in order to get what we're hoping to find? Like, what does it mean to trust someone deeply and potentially to your own detriment? Anyway, I could go on and on, obviously.
I wish we could, but we do have to wrap, unfortunately, and we'll leave our audience hopefully wanting more and to read your book.
I would just say it's well done. I don't get shocked often. The parallels between our story and this one, down to like how the FBI handled it and all the things, like it was like you definitely went through it because it was very similar to ours. So it was really good. Quick read too, even though it's a long book.
Thank you so much, Ellen, for your time. I wish you the best in the.
Thank you for the thoughtful conversation.
We enjoy it very much, and I hope it helps people. I think it will. I think it's a very well-researched and well-written book. So thank you for your time. Spending 7 years on the topic. My goodness. What a feat.
I've learned so much. I really have. You're right that when I started writing this book, I didn't know anything about cults. And now I know a lot more. Anyway, thanks for having me.
Thank you, Ellen. Well, everybody, that was part 2. We hope you enjoyed that conversation. One thing that I didn't get a chance to mention to Ellen that I was thinking about pretty much the whole time I was reading her book is that Nicole has a lot of exercises. Ironically, we also did similar things in NXIVM where you think about you're on your deathbed and do you have any regrets and anything you do differently and what are your goals? And she always talks about like how you're writing you get to write your story. And in NXIVM, we called it authoring. You're the author of your own experience. And I just think it's ironic that she's in jail and Ellen is writing her story. Chef's kiss.
Yeah.
Chef's kiss. Oh, and for the record, Catherine Oxenberg is mentioned in this book. She was not a member of OneTaste. She just showed up at one of the speaking events when she was doing some work in women's sexuality after she left NXIVM. That's a little NXIVM Easter egg for those who are NXIVM nerds. And
thanks for listening.
Hope you enjoyed the book and this interview as much as we did. Bye for now.
sinking down to the depths of the ocean, hanging on to the wave of my love. If I let go of it all, I could leave, but no, I won't.
We hope you're enjoying A Little Bit Culty. If so, please do show us some love. Drop a rating or leave a review. Hit subscribe on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen. And subscribe to our Patreon at patreon.com/alittlebitculty.
Even better, send this episode to someone who needs it. Maybe they're in a cult. Maybe they're just a little bit susceptible. Or maybe they just love a good story. Spread the word, spread the love. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.
A Little Bit Culty is a Trace 120 production.
Executive produced by Sarah Edmondson and Anthony Nippy Ames in collaboration with producer Will Retherford at Citizens of Sound. Our co-creator is Jess Tardy.
Our production coordinator is Lesli Dinsmore.
Writing by Sandra Nomoto and social media marketing by Eric Swarzinski and Brooke Keene.
Our theme song, Cultivated, is by the artists John Bryant and Nigel Aslan.